Massive oil price shock could be on the cards as tensions flare in the Middle East. In an attempt to halt Iran's nuclear program, the EU has banned imports of the country's oil. Iran's threatened to retaliate by closing a small but very, very vital sea passage called the Strait of Hormuz. A fifth of the world's oil passes through that strait. So what would it mean? What would its closure mean? We're joined now by Dr. Robert Patman, a Professor for International Relations at the University of Otago. Good morning to you, Professor. It sounds scary,
Good morning,
a big oil price shock, but in reality it would be far worse if Iran got the bomb, right?
Well, first of all, we don't know exactly what the impact of these phased oil bans will mean. The EU takes about 20% of Iran's oil, so the impact on the global economy could be substantial. Having said that, Corin, Iran gets about, it exports about 20% of its oil to China and about 26% of its oil to Japan and South Korea. And there's no sign that those countries are going to follow the EU example. And well, I suppose we have to think there is the possibility of steep prices in the global market price for oil. However, that's not absolutely certain, and we also have to think what is the alternative. And of course, one of the reasons the EU and the United States, which has also taken financial measures against Iran, have taken these measures is to try and persuade the Iranians to comply with the UN Security Council, which is to give some sort of interval for the international community to be satisfied that Iran is engaging in the peaceful exploration of nuclear energy.
Because if Iran is to carry on and develop a nuclear bomb, we're looking at the prospect that Israel will take action if the West doesn't.
Well, that's precisely the point. I think that's why I think the Obama administration is very anxious to prevent Israel from taking what it might see as premature military action. The Obama administration still believes there is time for some sort of negotiated settlement. Indeed, in the last 24 hours, Mr. Ahmadinejad, the Iranian leader, has said he's prepared to negotiate with the West, but he wants the West to change its attitude towards Iran. There's a lot of bluster going on here, and it's difficult to separate out the substance from the actual bluster. What is clear, however, is the situation is quite potentially dangerous, because the last thing the Obama administration wants, actually, is some sort of military confrontation in election year. It probably doesn't want it anyway. But you mentioned that the Iranian regime has threatened to close the Straits of Hormuz. That would be almost certainly, that would be unacceptable to the United States. That would almost certainly result in a military confrontation between Iran and the United States.
This action, the EU sanctions and the US sanctions on the banks in Iran, is there a danger that it could in fact bolster the regime? The public may be angry because of for whatever reason their living conditions decline. Therefore, it would bolster the Iranians to be more brave.
I think that's a good point. I think there is a possibility. I mean, one of the things that we sometimes overlook, that for many Iranians, whatever their political differences, and let's face it, many Iranians dislike the Ahmadinejad regime, many Iranians believe that the peaceful development of nuclear energy as they see it is their national right. After all, the Iranians have signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They claim they're acting within it. They also say it would be suicide to develop nuclear weapons. We must keep this in mind. They keep claiming, the Ahmadinejad regime claim they're not developing nuclear weapons, and the reason they say they're not, amongst others, they said it would be suicide because Israel, for example, has more than 200 nuclear weapons, and so they think they're outgunned on that front. Now, the point is that Israel and the United States and other countries are not convinced by Iran's protestations that it's committed to the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and that really is the crux of the matter, Corin. There's a distrust between the Western world and Israel of Iran.
I've heard a theory put around about this Japan idea, whereby there's some sort of a face-saver. You allow Iran to have the capability of getting a nuclear weapon, but not actually go the full way. So therefore, they would stop just short of it, a bit like Japan has.
Yeah. Yes, and that of course, would be dependent on a much better relationship between Iran and the Western world. And you might envisage such an improvement if the Ahmadinejad regime got displaced and replaced by a more moderate regime, which was, able to conduct more constructive relations with the West. At the moment, however, it's very difficult to envisage a radical improvement in relations between Ahmadinejad and the Western world.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Robert Patman there, Professor of International Relations at the University of Otago.